Hello, I am Major Retired André Tivierge, and I am the co-chair of the City of Ottawa Veteran Task Force. I am happy to bring this initiative to you in partnership with the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Ottawa. Before we dive in, I would like to present some historical context about the transition from military to veteran life. Back in 1998, a report was released showing the low morale and the poor quality of life in the Canadian Armed Forces and among the veteran population. This prompted a collective reflection on the social contract and the rapport between serving members and their families, the government, and the Canadian society. A few years later, 25 recommendations were presented, resulting in a rethinking and reframing of our policies and programs to enhance the quality of life of our serving members and veterans. Years later, the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group was established. Their approach is focused on collaboration and shared expertise across both the veteran support landscape and communities across Canada. Although transition services have been delivered for decades, it is only over the last 10 years that we've made giant steps in understanding what transitioning from military to veteran life is truly about. This is done by viewing its multidimensionality using the 7 domains of well-being, which you may remember from Module 2. In addition to traditional organizations such as Veterans Affairs Canada and Military Family Services, a number of nonprofit organizations have been created to help fill the gaps. Communities such as the City of Ottawa have been taking an active role in the development of programs to facilitate the integration of military and veteran families into communities. This episode is a great example of collaboration and synergy between stakeholders from the community, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the veteran support landscape. Today, you will be familiarized with the role of the Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group, their mission, their philosophy of transition, and the 5 steps of the military-civilian transition process, which will be referred to as the MCT process. We will also be dispelling some myths and stigmas associated with veteran patients and the military culture. Understanding these cultural differences is a key element in interacting with your veteran patient. Finally, you will be introduced to resources that veterans have access to, which might be helpful as you assist your veteran patient. Thank you very much and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, I'm Major Jean-Marc Lafleur, Medical Officer with the Canadian Armed Forces, and currently working as a clinician at 33 Canadian Forces Health Services Centre here in Kingston, Ontario.
I'm Major Retired Jordan Camarda. I've joined the CAF in 2006 as an infantry officer, sort of right at the height of the Afghanistan effort. Then I switched over to personnel selection officer in 2010, much more administrative, and recently transitioned out of the CAF in 2022. And I'm now the National Operations Manager for the Military Transition Engagements and Partnership Team at CAF TG.
Jordan, could you please explain the role of the Transition Group?
Sure thing, Jean-Marc. I've seen a lot of change in the CAF over the course of my 16 years of service. For a long time, there was a very heavy focus on supporting the most vulnerable transitioning population, those who were releasing from the military for medical reasons. There's a lot of powerful programs and supports and resources that are in place to help with that transition for that group. And supporting those who've sacrificed still remains the top priority for CAF Transition Group. But one of the gaps that's existed for a significant amount of time is the bulk of people who are leaving the Canadian Armed Forces for non-medical reasons. And up until about 2018, when CAF Transition Group was stood up, they received very limited to no support with the military to civilian transition. So CAF Transition Group was stood up in 2018 to modernize the way we support all transitioning members, including those who are transitioning with no medical reason to transition out. Since that time, we work closely with key trusted partners like Veterans Affairs Canada, Military Family Services, to redesign the way that members and their families are prepared for moving from the military world to the civilian world. At the center of everything we do is the person and their family. So in the past, processes were in place that were very much there to serve the organization. Since 2018, we've redesigned a lot of those to make sure that everyone gets personalized, professional, and standardized support for their transition, both for themselves and for their families, so that that transition becomes a seamless thing. In terms of our footprint, we've got about 32 transition centers that are stood up across the country to realize that aim for our people and their families.
Thank you for that. To go a little bit deeper into your answer, could you please explain the actual steps that military members need to take when they are planning their transition from the military world to civilian life?
You bet. It's come, like I said, quite a long way. You know, prior to 2018, the general approach to transition was you complete your release administration checklist, turn in all your kit, turn in your ID card, and then thanks, have a nice life after 25 years of service. And so we kind of realized that maybe we need to do things a little bit better and look at people holistically. So we've created a new military to civilian transition process, which we call MCT. And at the core of MCT is the idea that we need to support our people who are leaving along the domains of well-being. So when I say the domains of well-being, there are 7 of them: health, finances, social integration, sense of purpose, life skills and preparedness, housing arrangements, and cultural and social environment. So as someone goes through the MCT process, we make sure that they're ready and prepared on all these domains and that they're actively supported during the transition process. So it's no longer just a question of doing release administration. We're actually helping set people up for success along a domains of well-being framework. By 2024, this is going to be the main process that most people who are transitioning out go through. The process itself has 5 steps. Really what happens is as the member goes through those 5 steps, they're guided by a transition advisor who's an expert in helping the member navigate through their transition. What will happen at step 1 is the member, as soon as they start thinking about transition, will go talk to a transition advisor. And the transition advisor will get the member to stop and think. They'll say, okay, do you really want to leave the military, or are you just upset at your current situation? Do you want a change in the work environment? Are you tired of being posted? Maybe reserves is an option. The CAF has 130 different occupations. You know, maybe you don't want to be an infantry officer anymore, but perhaps one of the other ones might be something that you're interested in. So essentially what happens at step 1 is the transition advisor will help the member not make a hasty decision and just start rushing out of the CAF without thinking it through. If that person hears everything and they say, you know what, the CAF is amazing, but I'm kind of done with it, I want to go on to the next chapter in my life, then they will move on to step 2. At step 2, that's where the transition advisor will take a look at all of those domains of well-being I talked about earlier. So they'll administer a risk screening for the domains of well-being so that if there are any red flags on those domains, they're caught. At the same time, the transition advisor will also ask questions about each domain of well-being to make sure that the member has a plan for each domain. And I'll use finances as an example. Most people who leave the military actually have a lot of money coming their way, whether it's through the form of medical benefits or through a pension, or if they decide to take a transfer value. It's not that the military member doesn't have money available, but just because they have money available doesn't mean they have a plan as to what they're going to do with that money. So the transition advisor doesn't only just screen for risk, they actually dig a little bit deeper and make sure that the member's thinking through each domain of well-being and what they want to do there. Once all that information is collected, it gets sent over to Veterans Affairs Canada. And Veterans Affairs Canada will take a look at the member situation and provide recommendations back to the transition advisor about VAC programs, services, and benefits that the member should be applying for immediately or should be getting ready to apply for as soon as they hit the date of release. And what that does is it prevents people from falling through the cracks. Because VAC is engaged early on, members are prepared so that when they do hit the date of release, they know exactly how they should be engaging with VAC and when they should be engaging it, which was a problem before. Once all the information is collected, we move on to step 3. And in step 3, that's where all of this gets presented to a member in a transition plan. The transition plan has sort of 6 sections to it, one for each of the top 6 domains of well-being. And the member gets to review that and decide, does this fit with their goals? Do they want to amend it? And essentially, the transition plan document becomes the guiding document for the member as they go through their transition. In the transition plan itself, for each domain of well-being, there are specific goals that are identified. So for example, in the purpose domain, a member may want to have a second career. That would be their goal. To achieve that goal, a transition advisor is going to identify specific resources or organizations that can help the member achieve their goal and put them in contact with those organizations. So, for example, if that person wants to have a second career, there may be organizations that offer workshops on how to prepare for interviews, how to translate your military skills and experience to civilian terminology, how to create a resume. Transition advisor will link the member with those specific resources so they can actually achieve their goals. So they're not just getting a transition plan, they're actually getting connected with resources to do that as well. Once they've got their plan, they kind of go into step 4, which is basically monitoring, making sure that things stay on the rails. If the member runs into difficulty, then the transition advisor will advocate for the member. So let's say they're trying to get an appointment with an organization, it's not happening. A TA may reach out and try to assist or offer another organization for that member. If the chain of command is not giving time for a member to prepare for their transition, then the transition advisor will reach across to the CO and see what can be done to help support the member and set them up for success. The last step in the process is step 5, and that's essentially, it starts about 30 days before the member's date of release. What happens there is the transition advisor will do a handoff with Veterans Affairs Canada, and they will give the transition plan over to Veterans Affairs Canada and identify which members are at high risk, moderate risk, or low risk of experiencing transition difficulties. So what this does is it sets VAC up in a proactive stance so that they know who's coming their way, and they know that when the member reaches out to them or they reach out to the member, they're not starting from a blank slate. They see the transition plan, they see where the gaps are, they see the progress that the member's made, and they see where the member wants to go. Once the member crosses the date of release, they become a veteran, and the mandate for services is under Veterans Affairs Canada. But that transition plan continues to be the guiding document as the member transitions into the civilian world. So by 2024, that's the process that everyone will be going through. Right now, we've got it operational at about six or seven of the 32 centers. And this year and next year, we're rolling it out across the rest of the country.
That's quite the level of comprehensive care as our members transition. And there's a lot of support available for the member, if I understand you correctly. What support could you give to physicians who would be accepting these veterans into their practice?
Educating the physicians about the MCT process is important, so you understand the framework that members are coming out based on. So far, it's received good, positive feedback. But one of the challenges right now is that there's a bit of a mess in the organizational landscape when it comes to all the different health organizations, for example, that want to help transitioning members, veterans, and their families. And part of the contributing factor to that mess, I think, is that there are some myths out there about transitioning members that may make physicians hesitant to take them on as part of their case client load. For example, there's a huge stigma that all military members are broken, injured, and have significant health needs when they leave the military. But to put that in context, let's say on average 8,000 to 10,000 people transition out of the military every year. Of that, about 25% will be for medical reasons. And there's also a group that's retiring at retirement age, but most of the people leaving are not leaving because they have significant medical reasons, and no different than the civilian population, for example. So I think from the last census, it showed that about 1/3 of former service members are actually at the core working age group of 25 to 54. So just being aware that not every military veteran who transition has a host of serious medical issues is an important factor, I think. The other suggestion I might have is there's a lot of military members who are currently serving and being followed by civilian specialists. As part of the healthcare plan for those currently serving military members, eventually they will transition. So as part of their healthcare plan, physicians may want to consider what's going to be the continuity of service once they cross the threshold and become a civilian member. Are you going to keep them on your roster as a patient? Because if not, then they're basically starting at ground zero. And once they get out, they have to go ahead and look for another specialist. Those would be the two big ones that I would say. As a third one, I would also offer that most military, when they leave, as part of the new process, get a complete copy of their medical record electronically on a USB stick. So that means when they come to your door, there's not necessarily a need to go into a crazy amount of history taking because the detail will be there in their military medical record. So they'll come to you armed with that information. The real challenge is, like most people, getting access to the family doctor to begin with. If you think about the fact that if they had never joined the military and sort of stayed in the civilian world, they would have had a family doctor because they would have been sort of just going with the flow. But because they disappeared from the civilian scene for 20, 25 years, joined the military, and now they're leaving, it's almost like they're dropped to kind of ground zero, and they have to now go scramble and find a doctor and get on waiting lists and stuff. So I'd offer those kind of three suggestions to assist with physician understanding about how to support veterans.
Thank you so much, Jordan. That's really super informative, and I feel that family physicians and healthcare providers associated with veteran care will really benefit from that advice.
My pleasure.
Good day. My name is Lieutenant General Serge Blier. I'm a doctor in the Canadian Armed Forces. I've joined the military at age 42 and been having a great career since then.
Well, Colonel Blier, throughout your career in the CAF, you've provided care to patients in a number of roles and a number of situations. Could you please explain your journey in the medical services in the CAF?
Sure, Jean-Marc. I joined the CAF Health Services directly from Civil Street as a already practicing doctor. I was actually doing ER in Quebec City for 8 years when I joined. Being a fully trained doctor, when I joined, allowed me to start seeing patients directly as what we call on-the-job training. After that, I went to do my basic military training that all military folks do. I kept on seeing patients until I deployed to Afghanistan in 2007. In Afghanistan, I did many roles. Role 3 doctor at the CAF Role 3, which is basically where we receive all the severely injured patients from the field. The Role 1 doctor, both at CAF and CAF, which is basically Kandahar Airfield. And also did a FOB doctor, which is a forward operating base doctor at many locations while I was on deployment. I then returned from tour and continued seeing patients in the clinic. Eventually got promoted to the rank of major and the function of base surgeon, which is basically the senior medical authority in the area we were working back then in Valcartier. In 2011, I got the opportunity to go do a postgraduate degree in occupational and environmental medicine, and then started looking more at population health and how the work environment was influencing the health of our members and how we could adapt the working environment. And finally, I got posted to the CAF TG, which is Canadian Armed Forces Transition Group headquarters, as the medical advisor to the transition group.
That's quite the varied background. I'd like to touch just on the occupational medicine part of things. I think a lot of civilian doctors don't understand this is a huge part of what we do. We don't just deal with people who are unwell. We actually deal very often with people who are healthy but placed in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. So a problem that wouldn't bother you at sea level, if you fly up to 40,000 feet, you lost cabin pressurization, all of a sudden that minor medical issue could become a huge medical issue. That's a very big part of it. Now, working at the CAF Transition Group, what exactly are your clinical responsibilities?
For the clinical aspect of my job, what I do is when leadership has specific questions about issues, I will be able to provide guidance on that member who has special condition and special need in order to adapt the work environment and provide the best service possible to the members.
And would you please describe the type of medical records, the military medical records that we use?
Canadian Forces is actually using one of the largest electronic health record system in Canada. It is known as Canadian Forces Health Information System. The CFHIS enables over 3,500 CAF healthcare professionals and managers to located in health facilities across the country, and also on ships and overseas to have access to the health record of every member in the forces when they are being seen. And this ensures that the health professionals are able to impart the necessary real-time service anytime, anywhere for all our members.
Now, there are some particularities about this system that might not be obvious, but what could be challenges for civilian medical practitioners to comprehend our military medical records?
The biggest challenge would be to understand the military jargon that we use and all the acronyms that we use, acronyms such as PCAT, TCAT, MELs, would be the challenge mostly for our civilian doctors looking at the health record. And also those that have complex transition needs versus complex medical conditions. Basically, understanding the difference between military occupation-specific medicine as done by the Canadian Armed Forces versus the healthcare medicine done by civilian physician is the biggest challenge here. But it's not insurmountable, and I'm pretty sure that any civilian doctor who would have questions regards that was, first of all, has the patient what does that acronym means? And if he cannot, he could easily reach out to a Canadian Armed Forces doctor and ask what that is exactly, and he would get a response very quickly, I'm pretty sure.
Jordan talked a little bit about this earlier, but by which way or by which means can military medical records be transferred to civilian providers?
Canadian Armed Forces members or the accepting physician with consent from the member can request a full copy of their medical record upon release. Okay, we'll provide it on the thumb drive. As well, they are provided what we call a release document package from the health records upon release. That is automatically done now, and this will contain their recent main medical history, such as a full exam, blood work, diagnostic imaging, medication lists, consult and medical reports. The full medical record can also be requested by the physician to the medical archives of the Canadian Armed Forces.
What would be the challenges for veterans in securing healthcare while they're transitioning from the military to the
Securing a family doctor continues to be a challenge for most veterans and their families. In province of Quebec right now, there's close to 1 million patients who don't have any family physician. So it can take anywhere from a year to 4 years to secure a family doctor. So to help mitigate this challenge, basically veterans of Canadian Armed Forces who are releasing for medical reason will have access to telemedicine services in order to allow them and their family, because you got to remember that when a veteran retires, if he stays where he was posted the last time, chances are his family will have a family doctor, but not him. But if this veteran retires and uproots his entire family and moves into another province, then they start the whole process again, which delays everything for them and their families. So what the organization has then done is basically allowed those families to have access to telemedicine free of charge and it's virtual care, of course, and that's for up to a year. But this is only for medically releasing members for now. It's a pilot project, and if it goes well, as we are seeing for the time being, it will probably be extended for our releasing members.
That's definitely a welcome initiative. Now, assuming that a veteran actually has access to healthcare, for their providers, how would you say that healthcare needs are different for veterans and for the civilian population? In which ways are there differences?
I would say that reintegration to civilian world after a military career may be not as challenging if you have had adult civilian experience prior to joining the Canadian Armed Forces. It is more a challenge if you join at a young age and never had adult life experience on CV Street. If, in addition to these challenges, medically releasing members are also dealing with illness and injury and learning to live with chronic significant health challenges or disability unique to their circumstances, preventing them from being fully engaged in their transition, this will be an even higher challenge for those members. And that is why we are trying to support our releasing members.
That's such a valid point. Actually, for me, it hits home in the sense that I grew up in the military, and I see my friends who are retiring, and it's a challenge figuring out who we are when we do take off the uniform. So thank you for touching on that. Now, in providing healthcare to the veteran population, it's understood that you're dealing with a subculture of distinct culture within Canada with different perspectives and a different view of the world shaped by their experiences. So what advice would you have for a practitioner to help connect to military members, to veterans? What do they need to know?
Well, transition from military to civilian life requires major post-service adjustments. This adjustment begins with resocialization, a process whereby the veteran must adapt to a new culture during this process. The veteran must adapt to living with other civilians who operate by different set of values, and where both roles and experiences tend to be opaque or blurred, let's say. Researchers have actually referred this experience as reverse culture shock or cross-culture transition. This transition from military to civilian life includes complex and interactive set of shifts immersing the member and his or her family in issues related to significant differences between military and civilian workplace culture. Those transitioning are essentially moving from dependency on the CAF system to the relative independency and autonomy of civilian life in all its dimensions. For example, joining the military involves an intensive socialization process that serves to educate new recruits about the norms and values of the military. The socialization process encourages military personnel to be part of a culture that is considerably different from that of civilians and need to be able to operate in austere environments. You need to be able to rely on your body, know how your body is going to act in certain conditions in order to optimize your chances of survival in austere environments. Thus, members of the Canadian Armed Forces may face a number of potential challenges when they begin their transition from military to that of civilian life. This is a fundamental shift from well-being, quality of life, security in a highly ordered military community that need to be achieved, and then some goals in complex and time mysterious civilian world will be a very big challenge for our members. For the doctors to know this patient in front of them is not used to work in this new environment will be very important, so that if they see their patient starting to have a downslide with their morale and stuff like that, and it may be something they need to be aware of, and question the patient about how is he doing in this transition, how is he living with this new environment that is not as structured as the military.
100%. I think it's not a coincidence that so many of our veterans wind up taking jobs in similar organizations, police services, first responders, EMTs, or to other organizations that are value-based, either teachers, healthcare, that kind of stuff. It kind of continues the framework, and definitely there can be a loss of identity that comes with taking off the uniform. Now, based on your experience as a guide to so many people releasing from the CAF, what proportion would you say of our CAF members releasing are healthy, are doing well, are well adapted and ready for the transition?
The majority of the members releasing from the CAF are healthy. Like Major Camarda said before, there's 8,000 to 10,000 people releasing yearly from the CAF, and only a third of them are releasing for medical reason. The 2/3 of them are very healthy individuals who have trained all their life. They have very active habits. They got to be in good physical shape in order to be able to deploy anywhere on the planet. So, and they're used to making sure that their health issues are addressed so that they can go and answer to the requests of the government anywhere, anytime. So when they release, they are healthy individuals. Honestly, as a family doctor, those are the type of patients that I would want, because they would be the easy ones. But yes, there are a third of them that are releasing for medical reason. But even that third part, I would say that don't be afraid of them, because guess what? When they are very ill, we take care of them in the military until they release. And we make sure that they have all the specialist care that they need. And we also make sure that they are linked up with VAC, who will take care of them. And for the scary word, PTSD, those that are releasing with unstable PTSD, their care is taken over by OSI clinic, the operational stress injury clinics, which is manned by VAC. So they have specialists taking care of that aspect of their life. So you will not be left alone with those patients that have health issues. You would have a quadre of specialists following those patients. So, and those would be interesting patients to see, because you would realize that they want to get healthy. They don't want to stay sick, and they are very much engaged in their healthcare as well. I would say don't be afraid of those patients, and I would even challenge you to take a few of them on in order to see what it's all about and how good those individuals are.
I can only agree. I love our patient population, healthy, motivated, health literate men and women that, yeah, all the screening investigations are done. It's part of what you have to do to stay in uniform. And we encourage you to do physical fitness. We test you once a year to make sure that you're able to physically meet the requirements of your job. So absolutely, if anyone's hesitating in taking on veterans, I would 100% tell them, yeah, take the challenge, take on a few, and see how the myths that you might have, the stereotypes you might have, hold to actual contact with real veterans and things. So, Colonel Blier, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your answers. I think it really helps to, as we said, dispel the myths and the stereotypes that might be out there about veterans, and it helps reinforce the fact that veterans are actually the kind of patients that you would want to take on in your practice. So, thank you.